Well, they don't come much bigger than this for Norwich City in the Premier League at Carrow Road for this afternoon's game against Brentford. It's a really important game, of course. If Norwich City were to be defeated here this afternoon, it would be a 10-point gap between them and Brentford, who at the moment are desperately out of form and arrive at Carrow Road. I think it's their longest run without a win, since 2018. So that goes to show, albeit that hasn't been in the Premier League, obviously, but a very important game. If Norwich were to win, that gap gets reduced to 4 points. I mean, before we kind of discuss anything else, Pad, and we're going to come on to the team news very, very shortly. That just illustrates how big this game is for both sides, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the differential for Norwich, 4 points with a game in hand over Brentford with a win, or potentially 10 points. Okay, we're still a game in hand, but needs more than a game in hand if you're 10 points behind a team who you need to pull back in. And that's what Dean Smith kind of said pre-Man City Liverpool, that by winning against the Evertons and the Watfords, they dragged 1 or 2 in, allied to what they're not doing. And obviously worth reiterating, Brentford come here, 8 defeats in 9 in all competitions. A team really struggling compared to the start of the season when, as Dean Smith rightly said yesterday, they bounced in from the Championship and all that momentum and winning games. Maybe conversely, unlike Norwich, they didn't have quite the testing start in terms of the opponents, but capitalised, and you thought, on they go, they're going to have a good season. It hasn't happened, and they come here in, as Dean Smith said, inferior form to Norwich over the last sort of 6 or 7 games. So it's all set up, and we don't need to really hype it up. This is a big one. Dean Smith calls it must not lose. Feels like a must win for me.
Yes, and you've timed that perfectly. Here is the Norwich City team, and the big news is that Sam Byram starts at right back for Norwich City this afternoon. Max Aarons on the bench. The Norwich City line up in a 4-3-3 with this. Tim Krul in goal, Byram, Hanley, Gibson and Williams the back 4, Norman, Gilmore and McLean the midfield 3, Sargent on the right, Rashica on the left and Timu Pukki up front. The subs bench of Angus Gunn, Max Aarons, Christoph Simon, Dimitris Giannoulis, Jacob Sorensen returns as well, Pierre Lace-Malou, Shemiswab Quaheta, Kieran Dow and Jonathan Rowe. No place on the bench for Lucas Rupp, which is maybe slightly puzzling given the goal and elements of the performance we saw at Anfield. Pat, I suppose before we maybe get onto the midfield, we'll ask you about that right-back decision for the first time in a long time. Max Aarons is fit and available and isn't in the Norwich City side. Is that because of what he's been doing or maybe because of what Sam Byram has been doing?
Well, I'd say 2 things. Dean did make it clear after the game Wednesday night that he was very happy with what Byram had produced. He was up against 2 tricky customers, really. They had Jota and Tsimikas. Maybe the first Liverpool goal came down that flank, but over the entire piece, he felt, that was a step forward from Sam Byram. So there's that. But also, we have to reiterate that Max and Brandon Williams both stay behind in Norfolk. They both were carrying knocks following the Southampton game. And now, while Dean said, both after the game Wednesday night and yesterday that they're fit and available, you just have to think, is there an element there with Max as well? He's not quite physically at the level. Good, by all means, put him on the bench, but maybe not quite in a game of this magnitude, given how well Byram did midweek. So for me, unless Dean Smith tells us different, after the game, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's Byram taking a step forward against Liverpool, but also maybe just erring on the side of caution with Max, if Max, has still got something that he's sort of having to deal with. I'll carry what you said about Lucas Rupp. That is a very big surprise. And again, as I look down below me, Dean Smith doing his pre-match with rights holders. That would be interesting, and we will ask him about that after the game, because Lucas Rupp, no doubt, what he produced at Liverpool, he would be... I'd put him in my 11 because I thought he might have forced his way into that midfield 3. I thought maybe Lace-Malou would come out or Gilmore. But no, he's not in 11 and he's not on the bench. So you have to feel, because he's had these issues recurring with his hamstrings, that maybe there's a reaction to the shift he put in at Anfield on Wednesday night. But all that will be confirmed. Ultimately, he's not available today. He's not at Dean Smith's disposal, whether through injury or through Dean Smith's decision. And it is going to be Gilmore McLean again. And I'm sure I can already see 1 or 2 comments coming through that hasn't met with universal approval, I think it's safe to say.
Yes, and we'll come on to the midfield just a moment, and I'll read the Brentford team in just a moment. I've just had Adam's just shown me the latest score from the Leicester-Leeds game, and I can bring you positive news. I'm pleased to say Leicester 1-0 up over Leeds United at the King Power Stadium. Of course, that is a very important result for Norwich City today. If that could remain the case. Brentford, the key news is that Christian Eriksen gets his first start for the club. Ivan Toney back as well. They line up with David Raya in goal. Aya, who of course Norwich City were very interested in last summer. Janssen, Pinnock and Canos, they're back four. Norgard, Janelt, I think it might be Janelt actually at fullback. Norgard, Eriksen and in Bueno, Henry, Toney and Eriksen all in there as well. Their subs bench from Lurzel, Jensen, Visser, Godos, Onyenka, Janka, Baptiste, Sorensen and Rodoshev. There you go. I think that might be a back three actually for Brentford, but we'll try and confirm that before we go off. But yeah, Pad, you mentioned the midfield, and I was gonna ask you about that really because as you said there, rightly or wrongly, fans haven't been enamoured particularly by the duo of Kenny McLean and Billy Gilmore. We saw it at Southampton, and whether it was because of how good Southampton's midfield two were or the instructions that those two were given, it didn't quite pan out in the way that most expected. At least Malou and Rupp did a pretty decent job by all accounts at Anfield, and you would think that's an injury for Lucas Rupp, wouldn't you, rather than a selection decision. But what do you make of that midfield three generally? Because I think there's been a lot of criticism from Norwich City fans towards that midfield, and maybe suggesting that it's not of the standard needed if Norwich City are going to stay at this level for any longer than this season.
Well, you get a sense of the comments that are coming through from the viewers as well. I think universally they share that opinion. And actually, I wrote a piece about that on Monday after the Southampton game. That all season, let's be honest, the central midfield, and it isn't just solely focused on Gilmore or McLean, but you step away a little bit. They just haven't got that right. Now, whether that's partly down to recruitment, and we don't need to go down that route again at this stage, but the quality of player wasn't good enough. But also, whether it's Daniel or Dean thus far, bar the odd games we can all think of. I mean, I think of his first game here in charge, Southampton, that Everton game. But obviously that Everton game was Sorensen and Lise Malou that night. And it was in a 2 rather than a 3. So it just feels that over the entire piece, irrespective of the head coach, irrespective of the formation in the central areas, they just haven't found that consistency game to game. Obviously not helped with Matthias Norman and his long layoff. I think he'd have been a staple. But, I fear unless something clicks over the run-in, that when the dust settles and if it is Norwich back in the Championship and people will then want to dissect where they felt it went wrong, I'm sure the central midfield will be an area of focus, because 2 seasons ago it was the same. As I wrote in the piece, Daniel believed Tom Tribal and Moritz Leitner were the way to go. He finished that season with Kenny McLean and Alex Tete. You can get more different in terms of a pairing. So it is whether it's last chance saloon for Gilmore or McLean, who knows. What you can say categorically is Dean Smith feels, I think, if he has to put 3 players on the pitch in the centre of the park at the moment, with all of them available, with the asterisks, we don't know if Ropp is available today or was available, he goes Norman, he goes McLean and he goes Gilmore. And clearly one off night at Southampton, in his view, isn't enough to break up that trio. So let's just hope we're talking about, weren't they good today, a la Southampton in his first game, 1 or 2 others as well, rather than, surely that's the end of the road for the Gilmore, McLean, Norman axis. Time will tell, but there's no doubt, fundamentally, they haven't got it right in that area of the pitch, and that's why, given how crucial that area of the pitch is in the Premier League, to be able to control the ball, set the tempo, and then without the ball, be residually robust in protecting your back four. They just haven't got it right over the course of the season, and that's why, not the only reason, you can look at the goal output, you can look at the defensive areas as well, but I think, given how crucial the centre ground is in the Premier League week to week, they just haven't been good enough. That's what it boils down to. It feels like they don't have good enough quality in that area of the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just bring you that Brentford team again. It looks like Thomas Frank, who's just conducting his pre-match media duties down below, has reverted back to the 3-5-2. I think it's been more of a 4-3-3 in recent weeks for Brentford. So they've got Raya in goal, Aya, Janssen and Pinnock the back three, Canos, Norgard, Janelt and Eriksen the midfield three, Henry is the left wing back with Bueno and Toney the front two. So looks like a 3-5-2 for them, which is particularly interesting and particularly pertinent given what we're speaking about, Paddy, because that area of the pitch does feel pretty significant. With Christian Eriksen in there, we all know the story behind that. Wonderful to see him back playing football, and I don't think any of us thought that was going to be the case. When we saw the incident that happened last summer and the tragedy that followed, fortunately he's managed to get back to that and return into Premier League football, but we all know the quality that he has. Norwich City's midfield three are going to have to provide a response, I suppose, to that level of talent that they have in there. And that area of the pitch feels significantly, or rather significant, given the game that we're going to see today, especially the magnitude and how tense it might be, I suppose.
Yeah, and another name, as I looked down that Brentford team sheet, Christopher Ayer, obviously a player who Norwich coveted. You know, I touched on the recruitment element, and if the finances had been right, he would have been in a Norwich shirt today. So, I mean, I'm quite interested to see him close up, see what he's got. But you're right. Every time it feels Norwich have played a Thomas Frank Brentford, that middle area, and then the way, worryingly for me, a bit Southampton-esque, the way they then bring their wide players in, not obviously like for like in terms of formations with those two clubs, but the desire to control the centre of the park, but then whip it wide quick and get overloads in wide areas with two very progressive wing-backs as it is in this system. Norwich have struggled with that. Obviously, here in the Championship season, last season, the 1-0 win, Norwich were full value for it that night. It was almost like Norwich turned up and Brentford weren't quite at the levels they had been. But certainly the times we've been to Brentford's new stadium, both of those games, it's felt that because they've been better in the centre of the park, they've put Norwich on the rack and just turned up the pressure. Obviously, you know, it goes without saying that Norwich did win there earlier in the season, despite Brentford probably controlling large parts of that game. But that was a real backs to the wall effort. You wouldn't want to be in a scenario today where, you know, Brentford dominate that area with Eriksson pulling the strings and the right protection around him, and then conversely Norwich are really having to play on the back foot and really, really have to dig deep defensively in terms of their resilience. I don't think that's a game that's going to calm any nerves if you're from a Norwich persuasion today. Norwich need to get parity in terms of possession, and to do that, they'll have to be the equal of what Brentford are bringing in the middle of the park, which we know with Eriksson, you know, prior to that terrible incident playing for Denmark in the Euros, what a quality operator he is. I remember him scoring a wonderful free kick here in Tottenham colours at the River End. You know, a real high quality technical player. And as Dean Smith said yesterday, you know, his two previous clubs are Inter Milan, where I think he won the Italian title, and Tottenham. And obviously Tottenham are a bit Marmite, but on their day, and certainly under Pochettino, they were a very, very good outfit. So that's the calibre of player that Brentford have now got in their midfield. And it will be fascinating to see, can he exert the influence, you know, that he would have done prior to what happened to him in the red of Denmark. So, yeah, I mean, we spent the last 5 minutes talking about the central midfield. It's massive. It could ultimately define how this game plays out today.
Yes, it could. A couple of other things from a team news perspective. I can see a couple of people asking. Max Aarons on the bench for Norwich City this afternoon. Sam Byram retains his place from Anfield. John Rowe also on the bench as well, which was a question that we had a little bit earlier on. In terms of the other change, which we've not really mentioned or spoken about, Tim Krul retains his place as well in the side. Angus Gunn drops out. He was voted player of the month for Norwich City for February. Tim Krul was back in from Anfield. Did that feel somewhat inevitable as soon as Krul got in that maybe he would stay in, or are you surprised that he's opted to change the goalkeeper given what we said about the magnitude of the game, but also given Angus Gunn was looking like he was slowly improving and slowly building up in confidence as well?
No, it doesn't surprise me, but Angus is really giving him a tough choice there. Through the level of his, you know, from game to game, he seemingly felt that he was getting, you know, a real inner confidence about, now I am a Premier League keeper again after all the trials and tribulations previously at Southampton, capped by, obviously, you know, fans voting in Player of the Month. So that tells you all you need to know. But also yesterday, I thought he was telling when Dean was actually talking about Christoph Zimmermann. He said he's a leader, basically, and we haven't got enough of those in the group. And that was Dean Smith's words. Well, Tim Krul falls into that category. And in this environment today, and then Leeds away next week, we'll gloss over Chelsea for now, but in 2 games against direct rivals where it's going to be very tense, it's going to be about holding your nerve, and it's going to be about experience. Tim Krul ticks all those boxes. So, no, I think Dean obviously probably looked at it at Liverpool, and that was for him, maybe he made his mind up that you couldn't really hold him to account for the Minamoto goals in the first half, both of those close-range strikes. But his general game, I thought, was at a level which, you know, maybe allayed any concerns on the fitness front. As Dean Smith said, at Southampton, when Krul was back on the bench, he didn't feel he was Premier League ready because he hadn't trained enough going into that game. But we're 7 days on from there, and he's obviously played in the FA Cup. So, no, that doesn't surprise me. But fair play to Angus. I'm sure that was a tough choice for Dean. And Tim Krul knows now if he's maybe, you know, Publicly, he wouldn't have admitted it, but maybe privately, he probably didn't feel he was under too much pressure for his place in the last 2 or 3 seasons. That isn't the case now. There is a viable alternative, and that's credit to Angus. And hopefully, we'll see Tim Krul kick on again, because if he finishes the season strong, then you hope that is a good signal for Norwich.
Yeah, just finally then, Pat, because we're getting drowned out by the PA system. How do you see this game going for Norwich City this afternoon?
We got to be positive today. We've got to be positive. As Dean Smith said, he relishes these type of games when he has to step up as a head coach. That goes for his players. They did step up in those Everton and Watford games, notably. They're going to have to today. They're playing against a team who are very low on confidence. They're probably searching for where that win's coming from. 8 defeats in 9. But Norwich have been there, so they will know. Also, there's a desperation that will be in their performance today. Thomas Frank said it, same as Dean Smith. It's a massive game. Both sides know how big this could be in the context of what's to come. But home advantage. Hopefully, the fans come up with that mindset that we've got to do everything we can to get these lads over the line today. And if it replicates the kind of atmosphere and the performance we got at Everton, I'm going to go for a similar result: 2-1 Norwich.
Good man, let's hope so. Just if anyone else needed a carrot, as we mentioned, Leeds United currently losing to Leicester by 1-0. That will put them on 23 points. If Norwich City could win here today, they'd be 3 points behind Leeds, knowing that next weekend they travel to Ellen Road. Of course, both teams play on Thursday, so that might look slightly different. But in terms of ramping up the pressure ahead of the Premier League running, it would put them firmly back in the mix. That's the incentive for Norwich City. That's the carrot that Dean Smith and his players will try and take this afternoon. It's going to be a riveting contest, very nervy one as well, I suspect. There's a few stuff you may be able to see from Paddy's thing now. I don't think you can actually too much, but there's some plans in place to show solidarity with the people of Ukraine around the ground as well. As I look across to the south stand, there's some coloured, I don't know what you call them really, coloured bits of card that people will hold up, and that will display the Ukrainian flag. I know there's a few other flags, and there's actually one flying at the top of the city stand as well that I saw when I came in. Anyway, Pinken Plus, the place to go, pinken.com as well for all the match analysis and reaction. We've got our live match blog as well with my colleague Dave Freezer. Enjoy the game if you're coming down. I hope your fingernails last. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon.